Okay, so this is Ross chapter 17. Ross chapter 17, and it has to do with the imperfect conjugation. So we've learned the perfect conjugation. We've learned the participle conjugation. And so now we come to the imperfect conjugation. Just as a reminder, the perfect conjugation is going to mark the subject of the action, or the doer of the action, by changing suffixes. Those are the affixes that are going to be switched out, as it were, as movable parts or Lego pieces. And if you remember, those affixes were at the back of the word. So we had, zero ending for 3MS perfect, he did something. Comma te ending for 3FS, she did something. Ta ending for 2MS, you did something, and so forth. So that was the cow perfect. And if you remember, I told you back when we started learning the personal endings for the perfect, for the cow perfect, I told you that the other 6 major stems of the Hebrew verbal system, besides the cow stem, have a perfect conjugation, and they're going to use all the same endings, the same suffixes. So that's good news. I know sometimes we think, oh, well, there's so many paradigms, but I mean, really, the good news is if you learn the personal endings on the perfect for the cow, you've learned them for the other 6 stems, and so you'll always be able to identify the subject of a perfect verb, whether it's the nifal perfect or the PL perfect. Okay, the perfect conjugation, because it designates its subject by using and switching out these suffixes, is frequently referred to as the suffix conjugation. Okay? The suffix conjugation. In the imperfect, we're dealing with the conjugation pattern that is going to mark the subject primarily by changing prefixes, not suffixes. There are some suffixes, but the most important part of it is going to be the prefixes. And so the imperfect conjugation is frequently referred to as the prefix conjugation in grammar. Okay, so the prefix conjugation pattern. And there are a couple of other conjugations we're going to learn that are also going to be built off of the prefix conjugation system when we get to the imperative, for example, where it's going to use some of the similar forms that the prefix conjugation of the imperfect uses. Now, if you can get the prefixes and the suffixes that go with the imperfect, you're going to be able to identify who the subject is. Let me just make one more comment about the imperfect conjugation. The perfect conjugation we mentioned portrays or views the verbal action as a complete action, and it's typically used for past time action. Okay? The imperfect conjugation is typically used, and I will abbreviate it IMPF for imperfect, PFT for perfect. The imperfect conjugation is typically used for action that is in progress. Okay? Not complete. So usually, we're not looking at the complete action, but sort of viewing the action from inside as ongoing or possibly repetitive or habitual. Okay? So if I wanted to say something like, John ate a hamburger in Hebrew, I might see the perfect conjugation used for that, and I'm sort of portraying the action as a complete whole. John ate a hamburger. I'm just conceiving of it as a whole unit of activity. But if I wanted to say something like, John was eating a hamburger when the freight train hit him, okay, was eating the hamburger, I would use the imperfect conjugation, because that's portraying the action as in progress, okay, in process. So what does that mean? I just used 2 examples, both past time, one perfect for the simple action as a whole, and one for ongoing action in the past. Well, that means that the imperfect is not relegated strictly to the future, although that is commonly when it's used. It can refer to a past time action that is in progress. But much of the time, the imperfect is going to be used for non-past, okay? Frequently. So frequently non-past, and then sometimes it is past, okay? The perfect we saw frequently is past, but there are some times when it could be present, okay? And that just goes to show you that the Hebrew verbal system is not a tense prominent system. It's not a tense prominent system. It is really more has to do with this notion called aspect. And if you've done any Greek studies, you've probably been introduced to the concept of aspect. It gets to how the writer is portraying the action, whether from an unbounded whole or from within as a process. Okay. All right. Now, when we talk about who's performing the action in an imperfect verb, we will mark the verb with prefixes and some suffixes, and these are the persons, genders, and numbers that can be represented by the imperfect verbs that we're going to see here. So we have 3ms and 3fs. Those are familiar to you. If a verb is 3ms, he did it or will do it. And also it could be an it, because remember, Hebrew does not have a neuter gender. No neuter gender. So I have to use a masculine or a feminine form for something that conceptually to me is neuter, has no gender, no natural gender. So if I wanted to say something like the sun was setting or the sun will set, I have to pick, a 3ms form for that. 3fs is she or it. The imperfect will also mark the yous as masculine or feminine singular, so I could talk to you male or you female, or about you male or you female doing something. And then 1cs is first common singular, that's I will do something. Now, in the perfect, we had a 3CP form for they did something. But in the imperfect, we are going to have our own separate genders for third person plural. So if the they is masculine, I will use one form. And if the they is feminine, I will use a different form. Okay? The yous we saw, second masculine plural, second feminine plural in our perfect. We also distinguish them in the imperfect. You all will do something, whether you're male or mixed, or if it's female, you use the 2FP. All right? And then 1CP is first common plural. We will do something. There will be a prefix for that. So let's take a look at the chart here. And what I want you to see first of all is that we have here a set of boxes that represent roots 1, 2, and 3, because most Hebrew verbs are built off of the system of triliteral roots. Okay? Root 1, root 2, root 3, as in pei, kov, dalet, pakad, right? The idea of visiting. Or shin, mem, ayin. That's the idea of hearing or obeying. Okay? I can use these prefixes with any sets of 3 root letters representing different verbs. Now, what I have not included in this chart, because this is a general imperfect chart, these prefixes and suffixes apply to all 7 stems of the Hebrew verbal system. Just like the perfect personal endings apply to all 7 stems, the cow plus the other 6 main stems. These prefixes and suffixes apply to not just the cow imperfect, but to the other stems in perfect form. So once you learn these, you've learned them for all 7. Good news, right? So here's what I want you to see. To say he will do something using the imperfect, it's going to use a prefix yod, and my ending is nothing, 0 ending. If I want to say she will do it, 3fs, it's a prefix tav, and notice after root 3 there's no ending, so the ending is 0. If I want to say you man will do something, I use a prefix tav and no ending. And if I want to say you woman will do something, I use a prefix tav and a Keurig yod after root 3. So there is an ending there. Okay? And then if I want to say I will do something, first common singular, there's a prefix aleph and 0 ending. So how many of the singular forms of the imperfect have an ending or a suffix? 1. 1 out of 5. Okay? Keep that in mind. Look at the plural side. If I want to say they will do something and the they is masculine plural, it's not only a prefix yod like I've got over here, but I don't have zero ending if it's masculine plural. I have a shurik at the end. Now you've seen a shurik before for third person plural in the perfect, haven't you? So this should be sort of familiar to you. What's not going to be familiar to you is what happens in the third feminine plural. If I want to say they will do something and the they is female, I use the prefix tav, but I don't use a shurik at the end. I'm going to use a na personal ending here, and this shiva is a silent shiva. So write it in your special book of secrets, okay? That is a silent shiva. That means that root 3 will be closing the syllable with root 2, and this noon is a consonantal ending that begins its own syllable. Keurig yod over here in the 2FS, that is a vowel. So that is a vocalic ending. My endings will either be consonantal or vocalic. And remember, if they're vocalic, they have to take the consonant along with it, right? So root 3 is going to slide over and be the lead consonant for the shurik. Root 3 over here will slide over and be the lead consonant for the Keurig yod, and it will start its own syllable. Na is a consonant. It is, or the noon is a consonant, so it is not going to steal root 3. It is going to create its own syllable with the comment say. So there would be a new syllable here. If you were dividing syllables, you'd divide root 3 from the na ending. Okay, if I want to speak to about you plural doing something in the imperfect, I use a prefix tav if it's masculine and a shurik, and if it's feminine, it's a prefix tav and a na ending. Okay, so I want you to pay attention to the patterns here. The only place I have the na personal endings is when my subject is what gender? Feminine and plural, right? If I have na, it's 3FP and 2FP. Notice they both have the same prefix. So guess what? When you actually see the real forms, these two are going to be identical to each other. Okay? They are the same. They are ambiguous. You will have to pay attention to the context to know in your discourse, is the person speaking to a you or speaking about a feminine group of they. All right? Now, lastly, for the first common plural, I just have a prefix noon and nothing after that. So there's zero ending. Okay, so just like over here on the singular side, the left side, my question was how many of these have a suffix? The answer was 1. On the plural side, how many of them don't have a suffix? 1. And the rest have suffixes, don't they? So the pattern here is that there's always one odd man out. On the left side, typically the singular forms in the imperfect have no suffixes except for 1. And on the plural, they all have suffixes except for 1. Okay? So pay attention to which one is the one that's the odd man out. It's 2FS on the singular side, 1CP on the plural side. Okay? Let's look at some other things that are similar. What do you see as patterned chaos? Okay? You might think Hebrew is chaos, but at least it's patterned chaos. There are some patterns here. What's the same? Well, third person masculine singular and third person masculine plural share the same prefix, don't they? They have prefix yods. So any third person masculine entity is going to be marked with a prefix yod if it's the subject in the imperfect conjugation. Let me switch up my colors now. I have prefix tavs for the next 3 forms on both sides, don't I? And then, for the last one, the bottom one, I have a completely different set of prefixes, the aleph and the nun. So let me ask you, theoretically, How many different letters can function in Hebrew as imperfect prefix consonants? 4. There are only 4 imperfect prefix consonants. Yod, Tav, Aleph, and we've already seen Yod and Tav over here, Nun. Okay? So can I give you a little silly word to remember the 4 imperfect prefixes? Nun, Tav, Yod, Aleph. If I add these vowel points, what do you have? You have the word nutty. Okay? Dr. Marshall is as nutty as they come. So just remember the nutty prefixes. Okay? Hebrew's nutty. Dr. Marshall's nutty. The imperfect seems nutty. The imperfect conjugation uses nutty prefixes. Nun, Tav, Yod, Aleph. Okay? That Aleph, by the way, is silent. It's quiescent. Remember, Aleph is trying to close the syllable, and it's a lousy closer. Okay, so those are my nutty prefixes. And if you notice again, we could draw a line here to illustrate the pattern. The first line, prefix Yods. The bottom line, prefix Aleph, prefix Nun. In between, Tav, Tav, Tav. Okay? So if I were to give you a little drill sheet and say, hey, why don't you practice writing the prefixes? You could do that right now, couldn't you? What would be the prefix with the 3MS and 3MP forms? You've already forgotten. It'd be Yod, Yod, right? What are the prefixes for the next 3 on both sides? Tav, Tav, right? Tav, 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 Tav. Am I repeating myself? What's the first common singular prefix? Aleph. And the first common plural prefix? Nun. Okay, there. You got it, right? You've got all the prefixing. Now the question is, which one on the singular side does not have 0 ending? Second feminine singular, okay? Who remembers what that is? We didn't focus on it, but what was that? Yeah, Kirik Yod. Good. And then which one of the plural sides on the right does not have a personal ending or suffix? The 1CP. Very good. So I'm going to have nothing here and nothing all the way over here on the left, okay? Who remembers which ones get the na ending? Yeah, the feminine plural ones, right? The rest are masculine plurals. So I'm going to get na here. And what do I get for the masculine forms? What are their suffixes? It's the same. It's shurik. That's right. So their endings are shurik. So there you go. You've got it all in there. Okay? Now, to go back to our chart here, maybe what you also want to remember here. Let me get a different color here. Here, we'll do red. So we have the shurik there, just to show you that the 3MP and the 2MP both share the same suffix. All right? So there you go. Those are the prefixes and suffixes. Let me just ask you if, for the most part, we're going to use the future to translate the imperfects. Although remember, they can be present and they can, on some occasions, be past time. But usually future. If we're portraying the action of the imperfect as not complete, then an action that is future from the time of speaking, conceptually, it's hard to conceive of that as a completed action, right? Because it hasn't even been done yet. That's why the future is a good, that's why the imperfect is a good conjugation pattern to use for future time. Okay? So we are going to translate these as future time forms. So again, let me just ask you to think about how you might translate this. We'll just say the word blank for the verb. But if I use the 3ms with the prefix yod, who will do the action? It's going to be something like he will blank, right? If I see a prefix tav with no ending, she will blank. If I see a prefix tav with no ending, it also could be you man will blank. Okay? And by the way, the vowel points that we're going to see are identical. So these two forms on the singular side are ambiguous as well. And you're going to need to look and see, is there an overt subject? Is it masculine? Is it feminine? Is it a you, or is it a she? Okay? You usually won't have trouble figuring that out. So if I have a tav with a Keurig yod, it's you woman will do it. And then a prefix aleph, I will blank. Okay? Over here, 3MP, they will blank. And the same with 3FP. Remember, in English, our pronoun is they, and we do not distinguish in English a masculine they from a feminine they. Hebrew will in its verbal form, though. Okay? 2MP and 2FP. Tav and Shurik and Tav and Na, both will be you or y'all will blank. And then a prefix noon, we will blank.